I think you did present it as a panacea. I'm going to challenge the way that you're framing that based on your comments on Sunday. I'll read them directly to you. Do you want to live in a country where those at the very top live lives of luxury, but must do so in gated communities behind ever higher fences, using private healthcare and airplanes because the public sphere is so degraded and the wrath of the vast majority of their less privileged compatriots burns so hot? This is going to fix all that. And what responsibility does your government bear for putting us in that position in the first place?
This is really going to help Canada because $20 billion is a meaningful amount of money to invest in the things Canadians need. Standing for fairness is really important too. So this is an important measure. I am glad that we're putting it forward. I'm glad that it is paying for things like the biggest housing program in Canadian history. Things like dental care, things like our really important investments in AI. And what it's allowing us to do is make investments, do it in a fiscally responsible way, because we're building on a position of fairness. And I really find, I've been talking to a lot of Canadians, and when I talk to Canadians, they say, yeah, you're right. It is not fair for a teacher or a carpenter to be paying tax at a higher marginal rate than a multimillionaire. I think that makes sense to people.
But what's the proof point? Again, the second part of my question was, what responsibility does your government bear for putting us in a position where you yourself describe as the finance minister, the public sphere is so degraded? You talk about the money that your government is spending towards increasing the supply of housing. The CMHC says housing starts were down 7% nationally in 2023 from 2022 and expects them to further decline this year. Where's the proof point that the money you say that you're going to get from this additional revenue source is actually going to make Canadians' lives better?
Well, StatsCan actually reported today that permits are at a high, permits for new home building. So that is a very, very positive moment. Yeah, but you need a permit before you build a house. And the fact that we have a fiscally responsible plan to invest in Canada and Canadians has supported the Bank of Canada in something that is so important for Canadians, which is to be in a place where inflation has been within the Bank of Canada's target range for the past 4 months. That made it possible last week for the bank, the first country in the G7, to lower rates. But I do want to come back to what is at the heart of what we're doing. And what we're saying is we are a government that believes in fairness. We believe that everyone should be paying their fair share. We believe it's just not right for a teacher, a nurse, a plumber, an electrician to be paying tax at a higher marginal rate than a carpenter, than a multimillionaire. And that is what is the case right now in Canada.
And you believe only multimillionaires will be impacted by this? And I ask you that genuinely. I host a radio show during the day. I have been inundated the past 2 days with people who have called saying, I did not have a public sector job. I could not rely on a pension. So I decided to invest in a second rental property. I have worked nonstop in order to be able to do that. And I have paid taxes along the whole way. And now I'm being told I'm among the ultra wealthy that has to fund the government's income redistribution plan, essentially. Like, how is that about fairness?
Well, first of all, I think it is really important for Canadians to be clear about what this measure actually is. And so, as you said in your really good introduction, the first $250,000 of capital gains every single year is going to continue to be taxed at the current rate. You just spoke about a rental property. That means if a couple owns a rental property, their first $500,000 of profit that they make is taxed at the current rate. That's a lot, and they can do that every single year. According to our calculations, 0.13% of Canadians will pay more every single year based on these measures.
But the other thing, just to challenge you for a second, that's just an annual basis, right? That's not, some people will only pay capital gains once over their entire lifetime. So the number of people who may be impacted could be far greater than what your government has put forward. I know you want to characterize this as we're okay to go after the wealthy and the Conservatives are not, but there are a lot of people who do not feel wealthy who feel you are going after them.
So again, I would really disagree with the greatest respect to some of the ways that you've characterized that. And I would just say this is not about going after anybody. What this is about is saying, do we, as I said in those comments that you read out, do we want to be a country that invests in the things we need? Do we want to be a country that invests in housing? Do we want to be a country that invests in affordability, in things like a national school food program, in things like a national early learning and childcare program? Do we want to be a country that invests in economic growth, in things like infrastructure, in things like our ITC program, which is building the industrial transition? I think we need to make all of those investments.
But that's not all your government's spending money on.
And I think the fair way to finance, you have to ask yourself, do you believe we need to make those investments? I do. And if you believe we need to make those investments, then you have to say, how are you going to finance them? Are you going to just take on more debt? I don't think that's right. I think the way to do it is through a fair tax policy, and that is exactly what this is.
Our Canadians, wouldn't it be understandable if they were also asking themselves, are we going to get a return on that investment? You haven't just spent money on the things you're talking about. You also spent money on contracts with McKinsey last week that the Auditor General said more than half of which she could not figure out if there was value for money. She also came to the same conclusion on ArriveCan. You have grown the public sector considerably while at the same time growing the size and the scope of the number of consultants that you've hired and contracted by 88% since you came into office, the reverse of what you promised to do in 2015. Why should Canadians be sure that while they are getting this additional tax for the investments you say are necessary, they will get a return on that investment?
So I think the onus is absolutely on the government to spend Canadians' money wisely and well. One of the things that was in the budget that was really important for me is showing a decline in the size of the public service over the fiscal framework, a decline of 5,000 people. That's going to happen by attrition. No frontline services will be affected. But I put that in there very thoughtfully and intentionally because it was my view that if we were saying to Canadians, we're going to make significant investments based on tax fairness, I want to say to Canadians, and we're going to do it with care. But I do also want to really, push back, Vashi, against the notion that we don't need a government that invests. I do think
that's an unfair characterization. I'm saying, are Canadians getting return on those investments?
No, but it is actually the essential question here. Canadians have three essential choices before them. The first is, do you believe government needs to invest in you and in your country? Do you believe in things like government investing in housing so we can build more homes faster? Do you believe in things like a national program of early learning and childcare? Do you believe in things like the government investing $5 billion in basic research in universities as we have done? Do you believe in that? That's question number one. Question number two is, if you believe in that, how do you think we should pay for it? And what we're saying is, we don't think you should pay for it by just taking on more debt. Canada is running a very fiscally responsible policy, and you saw the results of that with the Bank of Canada lowering interest rates. So then you have to say to yourself, okay, then what kind of a tax system are we going to use to finance it? And this move that we're making on capital gains, it really is about bringing more fairness to the tax system. It's about saying someone whose only income is a salary, someone like a plumber, someone like a teacher, they just shouldn't be paying tax at a higher rate than someone who is a multimillionaire and whose principal income is through investment. And like the person who said it the best was actually a guy appointed by John Diefenbaker, who was kind of a conservative guy and who chaired a Royal Commission on Tax Reform, Kenneth Carter. And he said, a buck is a buck is a buck. And that was the principle that guided his recommendation that we tax capital gains in Canada. I think that is absolutely right, and I'm glad we're doing it.
I understand the fairness argument they're putting forward. The third question that you didn't flag, though, was the one that I'll circle back to. It's not just if you think you should invest or not. It's if you think the investments will actually pay off in the long term, that there will be a return on the investments you're making for Canadians. There is so much, but there is so much evidence that that's not the case. There are more people that, let me finish, there are more people than ever going to the food bank. GDP per capita is on the decline right now. Productivity, our own Deputy Bank of Canada governor is sounding an alarm about how terrible our productivity is relative to the United States. What is the evidence that you're going to take all that money from this new tax scheme and invest in ways that actually better our country? And don't you bear responsibility for the place we're at right now?
Vashi, I am 100% sure that our massive investments in early learning and childcare are already making life more affordable for Canadians and are already helping our economy. We have the highest participation rate of women of working age in Canadian history. Early learning and childcare has really helped to drive that, and that is helping our economy to grow, and it is helping Canadian families, and it is helping Canadian kids at the same time. I am equally absolutely sure that our investments in housing are absolutely necessary. What Canada is suffering from today is a legacy of underinvestment in housing, and we are turning that around.